So the title of this video says how to raise academically strong kids. And that's of course very Asian. I'm living between Malaysia and Singapore, and I know kids who go to tuition 5 to 7 days a week. And of course, not all the kids, but the majority of them would be attending tuition at least 2 to 4 times a week, and not because they're falling behind. Most of what they learn in tuition is more advanced than what they learn in school. So you can say that they do it to get ahead of other people. Why? Because everyone is getting ahead. So that becomes the norm. And that's the level of academic pressure on our kids here. And of course, as moms, whatever that falls on our kids falls on us too. Beyond having to chauffeur them to and from classes, there's also that added pressure for us to groom our kids to excel academically. I'm a mom of 3 wonderful children and 3 businesses. And in this video, I just want to talk about a topic that I talk to other moms quite a lot actually, and that's on navigating this whole chaos of school and staying on top of academic progress of my children as a mom, and how to do it without the stress, the hair pulling, and the suffering. So first thing first, I just want to talk about academia in the first place, because I think it's important to do that before diving deeper, and I have to be very careful that this doesn't turn into a bit of a rant. So of course the North Star for us all is how to raise academically strong kids. And that raises the question of what does academic success look like in the first place? And to me, good grades does not equal success, because I do not think that good grades are a good indicator of how intelligent you are or how prepared you are for life. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do have some tiger momness in me. I can't help it because I was raised that way. I do want to see my kids do well in school, but not based on grades alone. The current school system, I can't speak for all the school, but having put my kids through the Singapore school system, I can say that it's still very similar to how I used to learn in school back in the 80s, right? Some 40 years ago. And in fact, most school system hasn't changed much since the Industrial Revolution, where the goal was, and still is, I don't know if it still is, but the goal was to produce a workforce that would do as told. So in school, they teach, you listen. You memorize a bunch of information, you're basically downloading it from your teachers, and then put that to test every other week and see if you can still remember. And that's supposed to be an indicator of how intelligent you are. What's the point of memorizing and downloading lots of information when in today's world it's accessible literally at your fingertips, right? With Google, and will become even more accessible with AI. Yeah, so maybe hundreds of years ago when, it was cumbersome to carry around books, back then it would have been a good use of having an expanded memory store of knowledge. But now, that's just not the case. What's much more important is how you use this information. How good are you at researching it? At sorting through fake news from the real news, right? How good are you at synthesizing it all together and then deriving certain learnings or insights out of it? And then being able to communicate these insights well to other people. These are the skills that are way more appropriate for our modern life. And these are the skills that our kids can use after they graduate. And furthermore, I want my kids to be creative, to be able to come up with creative solutions But in the Singapore education system, they are very strict about children following a particular protocol or process. For example, in maths, they would teach you a certain formula, and if a child gets the answer correct and showed a logical working, but the formula that she used was not the one that their teacher taught them, then they would get marked wrong. Or maybe lose a point for not using the taught formula. I mean, I can't think of a more effective way to suppress the creativity and resourcefulness of a child than that. It's completely detached from how lives work, right? After you graduated. Because in life, you must have the ability to figure things out, really. It doesn't matter how you figure things out, but as long as you figure it out. As it is today, schools are still teaching kids to conform. Kids are taught to obey orders and blindly follow what they're being told. Children are told what to do, whether they like it or not. So to really stop trusting their inner voice and conform to what authority wants from them, and not surprisingly, that makes many kids depressed and unfulfilled. And I don't want my children to be like that. Instead of waiting for instructions and completing work as it is, ticking boxes, I want them to think outside of the box and come up with their own innovative ideas. Anyways, my kids are now in an IB system school where they are given a topic, and instead of just downloading it from a teacher, just lecturing, they would go and explore it either by themselves or in a group, and then they would have to research and present that. And beyond that, they also need to make an argument about a particular topic. So this way, not only are they acquiring knowledge along the way, but they're doing it independently and also actively applying the new knowledge in real life scenarios. I'm not here to say, which education system is better than the other. So I just think that from what I've shared so far, you can probably gather that my definition of academically strong is pretty different to the typical. And I just wanted to get this out of the way first, because as you can tell, this video won't be about how to find the best tutors or how to motivate your child to do homework, No, none of that. What's important to me is not grades, but skills. I want my child or my children to be creative, to communicate well, and to, yes, stay on top of their academia. And at the bottom of it all, the most important for me is to instill within them independence and a love for learning. And that's what I'll be talking about today. Because once you develop this, academic excellence will just be a natural byproduct. And I mean, my youngest, Will, when he was in grade 2 last year, his teacher told us that his reading level is grade 5. And he would take an 8 minutes mental arithmetic worksheets and complete it in 2 minutes. My older girls are always busy with some kind of volunteering, schoolwork, and sometimes they will come back from school and just immediately start doing their homework without any prompting from me. And sometimes I'm like, why don't you just chill and do other things first? And they would respond with, no, mommy, I just want to get this done. And this is why I'm such a big believer in the approach of building independence and a love for learning. And the best bit is that once you develop this in them, then the rest kind of just takes care of itself, rather than you having to come back to the same old stressful, nagging them about homework over and over again. And that just zaps our energy away, right? So, how in business, I advise that you should focus on those problems that you only need to solve once rather than the ones that keeps reappearing. And that's why I'm a big advocate for quickly building up systems and hirings, and once that's in place, then the solution will last you for a long time rather than you doing the work yourself and coming back to it again and again. Now take that into the context of our discussion of academics. It's exactly the same. Would you rather handhold your child to academic success and be glued to their desk all the time, or do you want to empower them to find their own way? Right? You don't have to be dragging them there. They should be walking towards there themselves. And my philosophy is that if you can do that by building independence and a love to learn, because once that's in place, they will take charge by themselves. And that way you can just take a back seat and save time to pour on other commitments. Like I've been able to spend time and focus on my businesses, and my children are still doing just fine academically. So when I was planning this video, it actually took me a while to try to find an explanation for how my children have turned out to be so independent since young. I mean, I was tempted to just tell myself maybe I'm lucky, right? And who knows, maybe I am. But I'm also a big believer in that things just don't happen by accident. Independence is something that is cultivated over time. And that's when I realized that I've actually applied similar strategies to cultivate independence in my kids as I was in my business. And my first tip to cultivating independence is to set clear expectations and boundaries, and then just lead by example. I don't shout, I don't tell my kids off, I don't make them do anything that they don't want to do. I simply tell them if they want X, they will have to do Y. And they can then decide how soon they want X. I never have to rush them. And as their mom, I know what their source of motivations are. For primary and middle schoolers like mine, it could be screen time, right? Or a play date, or a group chat, chatting online with their friends. And I just simply state that they can have whatever it is that they want after they've completed their responsibilities, which includes washing their own lunch boxes, they need to do their own homework first, and just getting things ready for school the next day. And then I calmly leave the ball in their court. So when they come to me, for example, for screen time, which is, by the way, is between 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. in a household after dinner, and I simply have to ask them, hey, okay, you want screen time? Have you done what you're supposed to do? If they haven't, they have less screen time left for the day. And if they have, right, if they have done what they're supposed to do, there's no reason why they can't have a game of Minecraft or chat with their friends or watch a video or two. So there really isn't a need for me to be chasing them around to do this, to do that. I don't have to. It's a routine, it's clear expectation, and in a way it's intrinsic, right? Because they wanted to do it. They want to do it themselves instead of me nagging them. And of course, what helps to reinforce this approach is you have to lead by example, right? Just like being in your team at work, in your family, or being in your sports team. Leading by example is always an effective strategy to inspire action, because it sets standards and it eradicates any kind of dissonance in a child's mind that may weaken your authority or the importance of your request. For example, if as a parent you are constantly banning your kids from screen time or going on mobile phones or scrolling through YouTube, TikToks, Reel, whatever it may be, and yet you are doing it all yourself all the time, then how do you expect the kid to act upon it? It just doesn't make sense, right? So you need to lead by example, and that's what plants a standard in your child's mind that they will begin to sort of meet with their own activities. And lastly, on the point of independence, it's a fact that true independence goes beyond just action. It can go into reviewing and assessing their own progress too, right? Especially if your child is older. Your child should be able to independently assess their own performance and then adjust it accordingly. This is something that I just learned last year. I realized this when my oldest daughter, Lauren, she sort of told me off. She told me one time, she was just fresh off doing something that she was quite proud of herself, and immediately I was like, you could have done it better this way. So she told me she didn't like it, and so what I've done now, instead of like, you could have done it better like that, and that makes me so proud, or that's good for you, and blah blah blah. Now I will ask my kids, like, every time they've done something, so are you proud of yourself? How do you feel about it? And then I ask them, do you see any areas that you could improve or do differently next time? And that's what I recently learned, that it's just so easy, right, for us to just jump in and say, you could have done so well here, or just immediately go, wow, good job. Our kids, they need to be self-aware. You want your kids to be able to start building some self-honesty in their own reflections, because recognizing something needs improvement is the first step to improvement. And that would apply to any domain, including their school grades. So often how I actually ask them now is, sometimes I go, how do you rate yourself 1 to 10? And how we make it fun and not like I'm judging them is that when we go out, we start rating everything now, right? How do you rate the movie? How do you rate that restaurant? How do you rate your performance? And so it's so easy for them now to kind of rate themselves. If you rate yourself a 7 or an 8, what's your justification for that, right? What's great, what's lacking, and what can be done better? And then once they say that, only then my husband Nick and I could jump in and say, oh, you're right? And maybe on top of that, have you also noticed that blah, 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 right? It could have been done, or blah, 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 could have been done in a certain aspect, and maybe next time we could look into it. So this whole rating system is kind of like our way of gamifying it all. And it's actually nicely bring me to the second point after independence, is that to create a love for learning. Here's the thing, if you want your child to be proactive with the studies, you need to create a love for learning. And if you want to create a love for learning, you need to make it fun. Striving for excellence can be fun. And I often hear moms, you probably heard this yourself as well, moms whose kids are going through PSLE, which is the national exam for all students at the age of 12 in Singapore. They often say, oh my God, it's going to be a horrible year for them. It's like they've accepted it as a fact that they, along with the kids, are going to have to suffer to do well in a test. So that's a mindset switch that I think that we all need to consider. Because if not, it is going to be a long-term belief that your kids are going to take on. A belief that they can't have anything good if they haven't suffered for it. Perhaps they might think if they don't suffer in their job, they can't be successful. If they don't suffer in a relationship, it's not a relationship worth having. Okay, maybe I'm veering off too far here, but I think you get what I mean. Anyway, just make learning casual, right? Take it beyond the desk. Normalize learning. Ultimately, we're dealing with children. If they're bored by something, then of course they'll have no interest in it. So don't be upset at it. Just calmly figure out why is it that they are not motivated in something and create a strategy that solves this. The one way that we gamify learning at home, at my home at least, is that the whole rating system that I just described, right? Another way for that is whenever we go somewhere to eat, for example, I'll allow them to order things. So just go by, right? Like, hey, I'm giving you $8 and the candy, for example, that you're asking for is $2.50. How much change would you get in return? So we have to figure that out before we go and buy the things. So just little games like that whenever you go through your day, right? And this is where kids is motivated to want to find out the answer. And questions like this could be fun and it's based on real life situation. And this is a great way to build that love for learning that I really like. And that's how I try to raise my children to be independent in their own self-development. And as a result, that's how I'm able to not actively, but passively raise academically strong and well-rounded kids through independence and a love for learning. Of course, different kids are different and they each may need different approaches according to their age and personality. You just have to judge based on your own context, your own child, and see what works for you. Anyways, I love having these conversations with moms because it's just so fascinating how everyone has their own style and approach when it comes to raising kids to do well academically, and all of which may work. So in this video, I've covered mine, and if you want to have more live conversations about topics like this with me and fellow mompreneurs, then feel free to check out our Momentum membership community on a 7-day trial. And with that said, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you either in my next video or inside of Momentum.